Good afternoon. Captain Todd Thomas, Green Bay Police Department. The investigation and the interview of the suspect involved in this incident showed that this was a planned and deliberate act by him to have officers shoot him. The suspect had spoken to people in the past about committing suicide and said that if he ever committed suicide, it would be by making the police shoot him. The evening before this incident, he initiated his plan by firing off the orange tip of a 6mm airsoft gun. He described the gun to investigators as being beautiful, and he also told investigators that there was no hope that you could ever think it was not a real gun. The day of the incident, he admits that he went to a family member's house to see them one last time and to try to get some financial affairs in order. He said he went to the gas station and he clearly committed the theft in front of an employee so that they would call the police to the gas station. He then waited around the station for the police to arrive. He talked to an employee and said he would steal again because they had not called the police. As the officers approached the suspect, he drew a gun from a holster on his right side. He said he wanted the officers to get spooked and to shoot him. He said that when they didn't shoot him, he charged the weapon and attempted to shock them into shooting him. The gun had a hammer that cocks back when it is racked to make it look more realistic. He said he pointed the gun at the officers and they shot him. The suspect also said that the officers gave him clear, loud commands to freeze, don't move, and drop the gun before they shot him. This was all confirmed by the officers and 3 independent witnesses to the event. Statements from the officers, the witnesses, and the suspect are consistent with the evidence, and it was clear that the subject's intention was to have the officers shoot him.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Schneider, Outagamie County District Attorney. I want to thank you for giving us the time and the opportunity to have this matter investigated thoroughly and giving us the opportunity to present our findings to you today. After review of the investigation and in consultation with the Green Bay Police Department and their findings, I have concluded that the actions of the officers involved were lawful, justifiable, and proper given the circumstances they faced. No action will be taken by my office related to their response and actions last week from the suspect. That decision comes after review of many interviews conducted by the Green Bay Police Department, some initial statements obtained by Appleton Police Department officers, review of written statements, some videos, and applying those interviews and investigations and the training and the standards for officers when it comes to the need to discharge a firearm given certain circumstances. As part of the analysis of the case, we discussed the layout, the facts and circumstances, the actions of the suspect, confirmed those through citizen witnesses who were present, which matched officers' statements about what had occurred. And that conclusion is mine based upon consultation, as I said, with the Green Bay Police Department and their investigation and analysis of what officers faced and what actions they took. I just need to add, and I think unfortunately in our community it's becoming more common that we have types of cases like this, but the actions of everyone on this day can't be minimized. This was a significant event for everyone who was involved and on many levels. All parties are impacted when there is this type of incident. Whenever officers have to engage in actually discharging and firing their weapon, it is an emotional decision for them and for their families. And there is also, on the other side of things, someone else who was involved. And in this case, clearly, the investigation has led us to the conclusion, based on his own comments, that the suspect in this matter had a plan, that he took several steps, several intentional choices and actions by him on this day to try to carry out that plan. The airsoft gun that was used, as Captain Thomas describes, has a mechanism which racks back, like many other legitimate and actual firearms used. And so that, in combination with what officers heard, what they observed in the short period they had, in the circumstances they presented themselves in, led the officers to undertake the actions that they did. it is something when we talk, and I just want to touch on this briefly, it's unfortunate, and the suspect and his family are addressing multiple issues, but we've had reports in other communities and ours as well that there is sometimes a sentiment of people who are in a desperate spot and deciding to try to engage law enforcement to assist them. And that comes, we call it, they want to engage in a suicide by officer. Suicide in general, though, in our community is a significant issue. And for those of you who are aware, this last year, the United Way locally has decided that much of their funds that they were collecting were to go to suicide prevention, awareness, education, in hopes that people who are facing these circumstances, and truly the youth in our community, if you report on the news, so you know how many teen suicides we've had lately, but if we can take anything from this, it's maybe trying to continue those educational efforts or that focus or those stories so that we don't end up with another situation as we had last week here in Appleton. I want to thank both the Appleton Police Department Chief Helein, Captain Thomas, and the Green Bay Police Department for, in essence, immediately responding, working through the weekend, didn't matter what the hours were, to try to expeditiously resolve this, get me the information that I needed in a fast manner so that we could look at this, evaluate, and come to some decisions. So I want to thank them again, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Helein at this time.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Pete Helein. I have some prepared remarks that I would like to share with you, and then we'll open it up for the three of us to answer a reasonable number of questions. So thank you for being here today to cover this important story. Our goal today is to provide the public with additional information regarding the officer-involved shooting. You have already heard from District Attorney Schneider and Captain Thomas. In accordance with our officer-involved critical incident policy, the Green Bay Police Department was contacted to conduct an independent criminal investigation. Their department deployed a team of investigators, forensic specialists, and a reconstruction expert. Captain Thomas coordinated the investigative efforts and presented his findings to District Attorney Schneider and to our command staff on April 15th. District Attorney Schneider has reviewed the investigative report completed by the Green Bay Police Department and determined that the actions of Sergeant Pieper and Officer Edwards were justifiable, lawful, and proper. In accordance with the Appleton Police Department's use of force and officer-involved critical incident policies, a use of force review team has been selected and will now conduct an administrative review of the use of force by Sergeant Pieper and Officer Edwards. The purpose of this review is to determine whether the use of force was consistent with policies and rules and regulations of the Appleton Police Department. The department's use of force review team will include the following personnel: the Deputy Chief of Operations, the Investigative Services Unit Lieutenant, the Assistant City Attorney assigned to the Appleton Police Department, one member selected by the Police Chief, and one member selected by each officer involved in the incident. Upon conclusion of the administrative review, the use of force review team will complete a written report of their findings and conclusions. The report shall include a finding that each officer's use of force fits into one of the following classifications: within policy or out of policy. The impact on Sergeant Pieper, Officer Edwards, and our department has been considerable. The use of this level of force weighs heavily on all officers who responded to or investigated the incident. Sergeant Pieper and Officer Edwards will remain on paid administrative leave until the Appleton Police Department's use of force review team completes their administrative review. This was a significant and tragic event for our community. We will continue to work closely with our community as we move forward. It is also important to recognize the impact of this incident on the suspect's family and the Monroe Street neighborhood. Please keep them in your thoughts and prayers as we move forward. Thank you. We'd be happy to try and answer some of your questions at this time.
Chief, how long will this use of force review take?
I expect it to be completed within the next 2 weeks.
And then at that point, you'll determine whether or not to return the officers to full duty?
Yes.
And then as far as the suspect, what is his status right now? And I guess will charges be filed against him, or instead will he be, I guess, referred to mental health resources?
We're limited in our ability to truly discuss the suspect's status right now, but I'm in consultation with Captain Thomas. There will be a referral sent to my office at some point for his actions for the theft, as well as possibly a disorderly conduct charge, but we'll review that in the future.
Chief, I know Carrie touched on this a little bit, but yeah, as the police chief, concerns about people planning a suicide like that.
Well, what's even, perhaps even bigger picture than that is the sad reality of the number of people in our community who suffer from mental health issues, and suicide kind of being the ultimate culmination of that type of illness. And it really reminds all of us as a community that this is a shared responsibility for all of us to work together to make sure we reach out and meet the mental health needs of people in our community who are struggling. I'm proud to say that the department has a very comprehensive community intervention team. Over 45 officers have received specialized crisis training to help recognize and work with people who are suffering from mental illness. That effort will continue. There's a variety of collaborative efforts already underway in the community to help reach out and connect with people in need.
I think it's the fact too that officers are placed in this situation because of someone's crime like that. Obviously, a concern too.
It is. Sadly, since 2008, we've had 4 officer-involved shootings. That is very, it creates a variety of concerns for me as police chief, and making sure that our officers are mentally and physically prepared for the challenges that they face. And of course, the discussion about officers being used in the fashion that recently occurred is deeply concerning to me. We haven't seen that type of problem, but certainly we'll do our best to mentally and physically prepare the officers. This isn't an issue that's unique to our department. I think all law enforcement has to take a step back and look at the variety of complex and dynamic threats that we're facing.
Talk a little bit about these airsoft guns that look like real guns. Some people might say, well, how didn't the officers know that it wasn't real?
Well, at the original press conference, we shared a photograph of the gun that was pointed at the officers, that was withdrawn from the holster. And as you heard today, the slide was racked, the hammer was back. It is impossible for anyone, including a law enforcement officer, to recognize the difference. These are dynamic situations where an officer is recognizing, seeing, hearing, processing that as it's occurring, and taking an immediate action to stop what they believe to be a lethal threat directed at them or the rest of the community. So I remain disappointed that that type of weapon is on the market and available to so many people to be used in a variety of different manners, not only against law enforcement, but also against citizens within our community. Any other questions?
Chief, I know you talked about the mental health issues that the victim was facing. Was there a toxicology report done to see if he was under the influence of any alcohol or drugs at the time it happened?
We're not able to comment on that at this time.
Is he still hospitalized?
Not able to comment on that at this time either, just out of the privacy concerns.
And can you tell us how many times he was shot? The man's family says it was 7 times.
Appears from the medical reports that he was struck 4 times.
4 times, okay. Thank you.
How many shots were actually fired?
There were 8 shots fired.
Is that what the use of force will determine whether that was legitimate, or the number of shots fired was a concern? Is that kind of...
That is really, that first piece of that has already been addressed by the district attorney. What we'll determine is if the officers were acting in accordance with department policies and rules and regulations, so within policy or out of policy. Any other questions that you may have? All right, thank you very much for being here today.